you started to become interested, and I would like to know the story, in unidentified aerial phenomena. And that's definitely a lateral move from your other interests. And so I'm very curious about all of that. I guess what I'd like to start with is why the interest, and why take the risk to pursue it as well, because you have a lot to lose, let's say, on the reputational front. And it's clear you're a very creative person, so I'm sure your interests go everywhere. But tell us how it is that you became interested in this and why you decided to pursue it with some degree of seriousness.
So, there's a couple of origin stories to it, but I think the easiest to start with is with the Atacama mummy, right? The small mummy that people had been promoting as being an alien, right? The mummy that was found in Atacama, Chile. And
right, that was a couple of years ago, not too long ago.
Oh, actually, it was 12 years. It was.
Was it 12 years ago?
Yeah, actually, already.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a long, long time ago. That was, and so I had seen it on YouTube. I reached out to the people who were, let's say, marketing it, and I said, "Hey, I can figure this out for you. I can tell you what it is." And so we arranged to get a small piece of the body, a rib. I wanted the rib because I wanted the bone marrow from within the rib, because I felt that would be the place best protected from bacterial contamination. And the long and the short of it was that we showed that it was a human baby. It was probably preterm birth, but that we found a number of mutations in it, in the genome, that could explain what it looked like and why it looked the way it did. And so, when a movie came out regarding that, circa 2012 or so, it was like sending up a flare to two sides of the world. One, the people who didn't like that I was debunking the alien. So I became an instant symbol of dislike for the UFO community, which is interesting, paradoxically these days. But then it also was a flare to scientists, as it turned out, as well, the intelligence community, that here's a guy willing to look at things and just call them as he sees it. And so that led, as it turned out, to somebody representing the CIA and an aerospace company showing up at my office at Stanford, literally unannounced, showed me their credentials and said, "We need your help looking at patients who've had harm done to them." And I was like, "Well, what kind of harm?" And then they laid out the data, literally like MRIs and X-rays of internal scarring of.
Are these people who reported abductions?
No.
Sorry. Okay. I'm off on a wrong tangent.
These are intelligence agents, diplomatic corps, military personnel, et cetera, all who'd had said that they were hearing buzzing in their ears, or, and then a small subset of them said that they'd been in proximity to things that you would call a UFO. So I thought it was a joke at the beginning, especially when they mentioned the UFO stuff, because I had no intention at the time of going back and doing more alien research after the Atacama mummy escapade. And so they had come to me. Why come to me? Well, one, I was willing to talk to people about this stuff, but two, they wanted to do blood analysis of the individuals who'd been harmed as part of a complete medical workup. And so they'd asked around and they said, "Well, who does the best blood analysis?" "Oh, you need to go talk to this guy, Nolan, at Stanford. He has this thing called CyTOF that can do the deepest analysis of blood that, currently today and still." So basically, over the course of 2 or 3 years on working with this group and on these patients, it turned out that these were actually the first of the Havana syndrome patients. I'm sure you've heard of Havana syndrome. So
review that for everyone.
So Havana syndrome was something that basically came out around 2015, 2016, and it was called Havana because it was the diplomatic corps individuals in our government who were getting headaches, they were having to be sent home. And it turned out that it's probably a kind of microwave technology being used by some of our adversaries. It's 100% real. Some people in the CIA tried to debunk it, but now there's a whole like set of paperwork put out by the Department of Health and Human Services on what's now called anomalous health incidents, where Havana syndrome and all of the sets of associated symptoms are all listed. And there's a path now for people who think that they have it to go follow it up, appropriately with the Veterans Administration or what have you. But, in the 3 years.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So you had someone from the CIA show up to your office, and he had a list of people who had medical problems, and some of those medical problems were a consequence of people coming into contact with what technology that is mysterious. Is that the right way of thinking about it?
Yeah. Well, they didn't know what the source of it is, but now we know that it was basically. It's an energy weapon, just a microwave weapon. Just imagine you could focus the beam of your microwave in a very narrow path towards a person's head. You'll bake the brain cells in their head. So, there's nothing magical about it. We have them. Everybody knows that these things exist. At the time when we were working on it, we were calling it interference syndrome. You call something a syndrome when you don't know the exact cause, but it can have a variety of manifestations. And so what we had done was we had matched the symptoms to what are called the international diagnostic codes, so that we had the ability to say, oh, it's this, and it's this, and it's this. And if you have 10 of 15 of these, you have interference syndrome. So at the same time, somebody was figuring out what Havana syndrome was. And it turned out that our set of symptomologies matched perfectly with the Havana syndrome ones. For most of our patients, we were able to hand all of that over to the U.S. government, and I've worked with Senate staff and others, on that, and that's something I can't talk much about. But what remained, and this is what's good about how science is done, once you've characterized something and you find it uninteresting, not that it's uninteresting that these patients are being harmed, but I could hand it off to somebody else who would then take care of it as a national security concern. What was left on the table were the oddities, and those were the people who had gotten close to UAP. They claimed, at least some of them, and they had, as it turned out, slightly different symptomologies. Some of those were more likely to have erythemas or scarring on the skin as opposed to internally, or manifestations on the back of their neck. Of some kind of irradiative damage of some kind. Now, there
was a pattern to this.
Yes, there was. Yes, and the pattern was always anecdotal, unfortunately, in that they had a story that you at face.
Right, but the symptom pattern was stable.
Yeah.
And how many individuals approximately? Like, what kind of sample pool were you assessing?
Now you're down to about 5 or 6 people. Because of the original,
so it's a small number of people.
Of the original 100 that we started with, 90 or so, it turned out, were what we could think of as Havana syndrome. The remaining were what were interesting. And, but sort of back to, let's say, my career. My career has always been, I've always been good at seeing the data point off the curve and realizing that it's not noise. Or at least asking the question, how did that data point get there? And not just, going with what's sitting on the line, but understanding why the data point off the curve is important. And then being able to quickly, again, back to that, iterate the possibilities, say, if we know that it's not a problem with the instrumentation, then it's an indication that we don't understand something. And so that was where I was already starting to get introduced, because of this UAP stuff, because of that, we had these groups of individuals who said that they'd gotten harmed by UAP, and we diligenced them to make sure that they didn't have some sort of psychological problem. They had full psychological workups, and we knew that these were people that we're trusting the nation's security with. It's kind of like, okay, well, it's an anecdote, it's a story, and now I've heard 50 stories like this by that point.
Right, right.
And it's like, well...
No, they say the plural of anecdote isn't data, but the plural of anecdote is definitely hypothesis.
Yes, right. And so once you start to get that, I was like, okay, well, there seems to be something here. And you raised a point, ruin your career. I literally was told by a senior official at the National Cancer Institute by around circa 2014, 2015, because I was just talking about this, just saying, isn't this an interesting idea? You're going to ruin your career, Garry. And I was just like, but the data's on the table. It isn't ridiculous to ask the question. But the fact that they were trying to push it off the table incensed me. It was just like, that's not how a scientist thinks. That is just and I said to him, I said, you sound more like a priest than a scientist. Maybe you should give your PhD back. Oh, and
well, there aren't that many scientists, There are a lot of people who act out the role of scientists, but that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Freedom isn't free. We hear that a lot, but here's what you don't hear enough. Online freedom isn't free either. It needs defending too, not with military force, but with encryption. Strong encryption protects your privacy and keeps hackers at bay. That's where ExpressVPN comes in. It's an app that reroutes all your online activity through secure, encrypted servers. Normally, your internet provider can see and record everything you do online, and in the US, they can even sell that data. With ExpressVPN, they can't. It's especially useful when traveling because that encrypted connection protects against hackers trying to steal passwords or credit card info over sketchy public Wi-Fi. It also blocks foreign governments from censoring or spying on your activity. ExpressVPN's transparency stands out as well. They've had their servers audited by PwC, KPMG, and independent security experts to verify their privacy claims and trusted server technology, which runs on volatile memory and literally can't store user data. Both our hosts and production teams here at the Daily Wire use ExpressVPN to reroute their daily activity through ExpressVPN's secure, encrypted servers to hide their IP addresses each and every day. They can browse freely without feeling like they're under surveillance. So if you want to join me in defending your online freedom, get ExpressVPN. You can use our special link to get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN for free at expressvpn.com/Jordan. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/Jordan today.
Right. Scientists are very peculiar people when they're real. So that's been sort of my approach to it, is like, how dare you tell me I can't ask the question? Because there's more than enough evidence that there's something worth studying. And people mix up evidence with proof. Data sits in isolation and has no meaning whatsoever. It only has meaning in the context of a hypothesis. And, so does the hypothesis and the data match to mean that it is perhaps evidence? Evidence, just as in court, is not proof of anything. That requires a jury to decide whether or not the evidence is sufficient to, manifest guilt or not. The same thing in a paper. There's very few papers that you will ever read that ever say there is, at least in biology, this is a conclusion. There's all kinds of weasel words that we as biologists use to give ourselves diplomatic egress, just in case. So, but, when people like Neil deGrasse Tyson say there's no evidence, well, that's just a lack of understanding of what the difference between data and evidence is. There's reams of evidence. There's libraries full of evidence. There's books I could drown people in with evidence. But that's not a conclusion. That's not what we think of as scientists as proof. Now, I'm of personally two minds. As far as I'm concerned, there's definitely something going on that appears to be not human. That's just my personal. Okay.
But that's different than science, right? I'm trying.
Yeah, right.
Go for it.
Okay, so tell me a typical story like the typical story pattern that characterized the testimony of these leftover individuals whose symptoms were troublesome but somewhat anomalous? Like, what were they reporting? And then you took it seriously because there had been psychological workups done on them, and there were a number of people reporting the same thing. So you know that something's up. So tell me a story, and then tell me what you started thinking about with regards to a potential cause.
Well, one was a guy by the name of John Burroughs and the Rendlesham Forest case, where he literally got close to one that came down near our nuclear storage facilities there. It's a very famous case. And he came to me as part of this group of 10 remainders, and I was introduced to him to do the blood analysis and do the collection of the blood. And then later, as it turned out, and here's an interesting thing, later he developed a heart problem, and he couldn't get the Veterans Administration to open up his file so that he could prove that it might have actually been originally caused at Rendlesham in England, because his medical file was deemed top secret. So we literally had to go to, and this is on the record, we literally had to go to Senator McCain, in whose state this guy lived in Arizona, and get him to write a letter to the Veterans Administration forcing them to open his file so that he could get insurance payment for his heart condition. It's all on the record. So why does an individual who had a problem that he claims had been, caused through some interaction way back when, why do you have to make his file top secret? What's in it? There was nothing in it, frankly. It was just somebody had decided it needed to be top secret because things related to UFOs just need to be, nobody talks about them, brush them under the table. But we literally, and it's public record.